of fellowship. Uh, you gotta love fellowship. I mean, the communion of the saints, it's awesome. And the friendships we build in Christ, amazing, amazing. Um, the downside of that is you often will bond pretty deeply with someone or several someones who wind up backsliding, sometimes seriously, sometimes for a long time. Hey, I've been on both ends of that. I've had a serious backslide in my life. I remember Christian friends coming to me, asking me what the heck was going on, telling me they'd love to better understand why I was making the decisions I was making and how they were worried about me and praying for me and really hoped that I'd reconsider. And I mean, I face it, I caused pain. And I've been on the other side of it, and that, yeah, I've had, in fact, I have, as we speak, friends who I've been very close to, who have either walked away from the faith completely or they have so embraced a life dominating sin that they have prioritized that over God. And I'm living with that pain. I think you know what I'm talking about. It's the pain of loving the prodigal. You worry, wow, could I have done more? What happened? What's going to happen? I mean, is this person I love so much damned? Is this person ever going to come back? What can I do? Well, I want to talk about three aspects of that and look a little more at the experience of what it's like when you've got a loved one or a friend who's backslidden and you're asking, is my backslidden friend damned? Is this all over? Let's talk about that. But first, I do want to talk about liking this page. If you haven't yet liked this Facebook page, would you? And if you haven't yet shared it with someone, if you do enjoy these messages, please do share them, pass it on. We'd love to build this community up. And hey, if you've got any ideas, doctrinal topics that you want to talk about, this is Sound Doctrine Bites, sound bites, but sound doctrine bites. We want to talk about different biblical points that are relevant today. I'd love to hear from you. So any suggestions you've got, I'll take those pretty seriously. Okay. So, is my backslidden friend damned, doomed, or is it just a dangerous situation? Well, for sure it's dangerous, but let's look at a few other D's that could be playing into this. Your backslidden friend may not be on a one-way trip to hell. Your backslidden friend, though, may be deceived. Now, that happens a lot when people are backslidden. Paul wrote to the Corinthians about this very thing. 2 Corinthians 11:3, he said, whoa, I'm afraid for you, okay? I fear lest, like Eve, you have been deceived. So, yeah, Christians can be deceived. I mean, they can believe a lie and they can be acting on the lie that they've come to believe. Let me say quickly, I don't think that's an indicator that they're innocent. I mean, deception doesn't just mug us when we're walking down the street. I am convinced that when a Christian becomes deceived, it is because she or he has chosen to believe a lie based on their area of weakness or their area of desire. As a boomer, I was a big Simon and Garfunkel fan. Some of you don't even know who I'm talking about, but that was a very popular pop duo in the 60s and early 70s. They had a great song called The Boxer. One of the lyrics, part of the lyrics say, all lies in jest. Still a man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. So deception, false doctrine, false teaching, or deception, it appeals to an area of weakness. So, for example, the false doctrine of name it and claim it. If you want it, just claim it and it'll all be yours. That appeals to greed, I once had a Christian couple come to me and say, hey, God has shown us we can smoke marijuana. It's okay with him because he said, take every herb of the field. I love that one. Here's one that some people have fallen for, and it's a very serious error. You'll sometimes hear people say, well, I'm leaving my wife, but I'm leaving because God has shown me she was not the one he intended for me. This other woman I've fallen in love with, that's the one God intended for me. So I'm repenting of the sin of marrying my wife, and I'm correcting it by marrying this other woman. Wow, that was handy, wasn't it? But that again it's appealing to his desire to get out of his marriage and try to find some legitimization for it. So deception does not mean innocent, but it can mean deceived. And there really is a place for asking, hey, come on, can you tell me how you have come to believe this? So often a backslidden person will say, well, I really believe this is the right thing to do. I think this is the right relationship to be in, or the right way to relate, or the right lifestyle to adopt, or whatever. If you want to poke around a little in that, and can you help me better understand how you came to believe this? And probably the important follow-up question, do you still believe in the Word of God? And if you do, what does it have to say about what you're embracing right now? Real important question to ask the backslider. So there's deception. That's one reason that someone you love very much may be backslidden. Does not necessarily mean they're damned, but it means they're deceived. Serious place to be, but it's not damnation. Second, there is rebellion. There's deception. Someone is deceived, and there's out and out rebellion. That's when a person is basically going with their natural mind or their carnal mind. Paul told the Romans 8:7, the natural mind is at enmity against God. The natural mind is a rebel. It's a rebel. Rebellion, boy, don't underestimate how powerful that is. That was Lucifer's eternal error, wasn't it? You look at Isaiah 14:12-14, and you read that Lucifer basically said in his heart, I will ascend, I will be like the Most High. I'm going to be basically in rebellion against God himself. And that to me makes more sense out of what Samuel said, 1 Samuel 15:23. Rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. It's Luciferian in its origins. Pretty serious stuff. Now, why would anybody be so stupid as to rebel against God? Well, good question. There are probably a lot of reasons, but there's two, I think, wrapped up in the same concept of disappointment. There's disappointment in God and disappointment in Christians, and those are two common reasons people rebel against God. Your friend may have become disappointed in God. Let's be honest. I think we've all at some point been disappointed in God. Now, if I'm disappointed in God, it does not mean I have a legitimate case against God. The problem is me. I'm disappointed because I'm just not seeing things clearly. God is never wrong. I'm wrong. So when I'm disappointed in God, basically it's because he allowed something that, I don't think he should have allowed, like he takes advice from me. But I mean, seriously, there are terrible things that happen in the lives of so many believers. How many believers have lost children to death? I can't even conceive of what that would be like. Believers stricken with terrible diseases or terrible tragedies or some violence committed against them or who knows what. I mean, that will often lead to rebellion if the believer isn't careful. And that's a common temptation. I mean, when Job was stricken with all of those different diseases and all those tragedies, what did his wife say? Cursed God and die. Yeah, mad at God, disappointment in God. And that's one reason a lot of people backslide. Another is disappointment in Christians. I can't tell you, oh, well, yourself. I mean, my goodness, look on the internet. There are websites and websites and websites devoted to people, dedicated to people, run by people who have been disappointed in the church, disappointed in Christians. Is that a legitimate reason to backslide? Of course not. No. Hey, what happened between you and God was between you and God. When you were born again, that was between you and him. He gave you a new nature. You live in communion with him, and he is to be your first love. What somebody else does is not meant to abort that or disrupt that or whatever that. I mean, But let's face it, there's no hurt, I should say, like church hurt. There's no hurt like church hurt. I know that. I mean, we expect good from each other, and we're vulnerable to each other. And when Christians let you down, wow, it wounds you pretty deeply. So I understand it. I don't legitimize it, but I understand it. There are people who rebel either because they're disappointed in God or they're disappointed in Christians. So could be that your friend is disappointed. Again, that doesn't mean your friend is damned, but your friend is disappointed and thereby in rebellion. Third, there's carnality, okay? There's just plain old carnality. I mean, there is rebellion, and there is disappointment, and then there's just getting comfortable with the world, and you start thinking like the world and acting like the world, and basically you adopt the ways of the world. That's what Paul was saying to the Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 3:3-4, when he said, oh man, come on, you're into all these little factions, you're into all your little groupies and your little cliques and whatnot. And he said, if that's the way you are, if you follow men rather than God, are you not carnal? Are you not living according to the natural mind? You get comfortable with the world, and one of the first things that's going to happen, And when I say comfortable with the world, I don't mean comfortable with a good football game or a good musical play or a good opera or a good painting. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what the world really is. John spelled it out. The world, well, all that is of the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, that's the world. You get comfortable with worldliness, your zeal's going to grow cold. It has to. Never fails, never fails. Your love for him will grow cold. Your zeal for him will grow cold, and you'll get more and more carnal to the point where you're barely recognizable anymore as a believer. That's carnality. And that happens because you're not investing. If you're not investing in your spiritual life, you're not in the Word, you're not taking in the Word of God, by which you judge yourself and by which you're built up and corrected and guided and comforted. You're not praying, you're not communing with him. You stop communing with believers. Well, whatever you've attained has to be maintained. That's true. You have to invest in it, and what you're investing in is going to pretty much show up in your life. So, could be that your friend has just gotten carnal. Okay. Now, none of that means that this is the end. Okay. There are three things that can happen, and I draw a lot of hope from these. I've seen them happen time again and again in backslidden people, and they could happen to the person you love as well. The first is crisis. The backslidden Christian can have a crisis. Why? Because he starts reaping what he's sown. Galatians 6:8. If he sows to the flesh, if anyone is sowing to the flesh, he is going to, of the flesh, reap corruption. That's very hard to go through, but it can create a crisis where you realize, oh my gosh, where has that gotten me? I've been investing in this habit, in this person, in this way of life. And all of a sudden, oh, I'm having a crisis because I'm realizing it's not only gotten me nowhere, it's done a lot of damage to me. Okay, good. Because that can turn that person around, you see? So that's one thing you can pray for and hope for is a crisis. Another is hunger. When people are backslidden, at some point, they're going to wake up like the prodigal did and reconsider something. Hey, I had it better in my father's house. So God said through Isaiah 55:2, why do you spend your money for that which is not bread and your labor for that which cannot satisfy? The prodigal, the backslidden person, at some point is very likely to reconsider and think, whoa, I'm hungry. I thought that worldliness was the answer, but I missed the communion I had with God. I am hungry for what I once had. So there's crisis, there's hunger, and there's also fear. And there's a place for that. There's a place for that. The author of Hebrews said, Hebrews 10:31, it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. And yeah, there is a place for a person thinking, whoa, wait a minute. Am I despising the grace of God? Am I mocking God? Because I do remember reading in his word, he's not going to be mocked. Okay, so there is a fear factor. Hey, if you've got somebody you love very much and you're worried about their salvation, you think, oh my gosh, have they crossed the line yet? Now, I'm not going to get into that debate, that age-old debate over whether or not you can lose your salvation. But I will say this, if you can lose it, it is not an easy thing to do. So rather than assuming when a friend of mine is backslidden, I hold out a lot of hope. I don't automatically think, okay, that's it. Ichabod, the Lord's departed, forget it. That person may be in rebellion. Well, God knows how to turn the rebel around. The person may be deceived, or the person may be very carnal, just living like the world. So, what do you do in the meantime? Beware, be there, be in prayer. Beware. Now, Paul told the Galatians, don't pat yourself on the back. If you have a backslidden friend, just keep in mind that could be you too. There, but by the grace of God, go you. So Galatians 6:1, if a man is overtaken in a fault, you who are spiritual, restore him in a spirit of meekness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted, okay? So be aware of the fact that, hey, none of us are so beyond the point of temptation that we couldn't backslide ourselves if we made a few wrong decisions. You could, I could. Beware. Be there, okay? Be there. I so remember how many Christian friends said to me when I was backslidden, okay, you don't seem to want to talk now, but I'll be here. I am available. The door is always open. Be there and be in prayer. Be in prayer. Keep this in mind, okay? This isn't a Hallmark greeting card little saying. It's a fact. The effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much, James 5:16. The effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. You want your backslidden friend to come back and walk in the light. How much more does God want that backslidden friend to come back and walk in the light? So, hey, you be praying effectively. Beware, be there, be in prayer. Yeah. And keep running your race, But you know what? Caring about your friend, praying for your friend, longing for your friend to be back where he or she belongs, that's a part of your race too. So let's keep running. Well, if you have not yet checked out my weekly podcast, I wish you would. Go to YouTube and you'll find Christians in a Cancel Culture, Joe Dallas. That's a weekly podcast on how to deal with current issues from a biblical perspective, how to speak and express Christian truth when the world is becoming more and more hostile to that truth. And if you are enjoying these messages, you'd like to support our ministry, we could sure use your partnership. Just go to joedallas.com/giving, and you can see how you can support Cloudfire Ministries with your tax-deductible gift. Well, this is Sound Doctrine Bites. We're with you every other Wednesday, and I'll look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks. God bless.